Hello, in this video I will explain you a little bit about how to work in the pattern recognition phase of the analysis. So working together is the key in this analysis session. Contrary to more traditional academic research where the smart scientist, the lonely genius, comes up with something awesome and gets his own name on a Nobel Prize. This is something different. You're not gonna be, owning the ideas that you come up with, and there's not gonna be breakthroughs named after yourself or anything like that. For this project, you basically just working in teams, and yes, you will also need to think alone. You don't have to be in underground somewhere where it's dark and you're just completely alone, but you also, besides thinking by yourself, need to think together, which is perhaps even more challenging, because that means you have to discuss, you have to share, you have to be able to articulate your thoughts and then develop them together. And this is necessary in order to make sense of the data that you've gathered together. So whether you've done the interview or someone else, you have to be able to all analyze it. And in order to be able to do this, first of all, you have to share the data and share it in a format that is accessible to the whole team, and take that time to go through it and think about it from different perspectives while you're going through the data. And again, just find ways of combining the thinking by yourself part and then discussing with your teammates about, oh, this is the thought I've had while going through the data. And that's a good way to actually prepare yourself for coming up with some kind of insights. The way to do this, it's just I'll explain a simple sort of a method. The method doesn't really get you anywhere, but it serves as a framework of how to actually think together and what to build upon. So it's called affinity diagrams, and you probably heard about affinity diagrams or done it in one or other form. And yes, you're allowed to use post-its, different colors, obviously, but you can also use any other kind of labels or small pieces of paper or whatever. And there's also digital tools to doing this, but the main thing you need to understand here is that this is not an ideation session, but an analysis session. And this means that you're constantly analyzing the data in order to find answers to those research questions that you have. And if you do come up with ideas, which you probably will because you're creative students, write them on post-its that are different color, put them in some separate idea bucket for the future use, or just get rid of them for the time of doing the analysis together. You don't need them there. And the affinity diagram itself is actually developed by an anthropologist, Jiro Kawakita, Japanese guy, and it's sometimes referred to as KJ method also, and that's after him. Basically, the way to think about it is that there's 3 key steps. First of them being the label making. So record each idea on cards or notes. And important thing here is to only have one thing on one label. So one thought, one concept, just one thing on each of the labels. Otherwise they're really hard to move around and break up or combine. Another thing that is really important is that don't write something too general there. Like, for example, writing something like social connections matter in decision making. Obviously they do, yes, but that doesn't really mean anything. It's such a wide expression. So specify and break it into smaller pieces, multiple post-its, for example, and answer the questions that it actually begs. Like, okay, so social connections, which connections? So how do they matter, and in what kind of decision making? This first step and sometimes also the second step are often considered to be silent rounds, meaning that there's no talking involved while you're working in the team. You don't have to be a Puritan about this. Find a way that works for you and your team. But the second step is called label grouping, which means that you have to physically be able to spread the labels somehow. I guess that's why the post-its are good, because you can actually move them around on the wall and they are supposed to stick on the wall. And they do stick better on the wall if you pull them downwards like this instead of just slowly ripping them off from each other. But yes, physically spread them. Look for the ideas that seem to be related somehow. You can always build groups, subgroups, and break them down, rebuild them again, combine things, separate things, and even add new labels at this stage if it's needed. And if you seem to have these labels that don't fit into any of the groups, don't worry about it, don't throw them away. Keep these lone wolves somewhere in the side and see what happens with them down the line when you continue the analysis together. This grouping stage, it's very important to take enough time, and really you have to be really immersed in the data before making any strong judgments here on this stage. The third one, chart making, that's when you start naming the different groups that have some kind of commonalities, and you start looking for potential connections between the groups, like whether there's some kind of cause and effect between the groups, whether there are contradictions and so on. You can mark these with arrows or any other symbols. Okay, that's the way to actually put the data on the wall or on the table together and think about it as a team. And in order to find those those different fruitful patterns, you can do how many steps of these again and again as you need to, or you can do the whole exercise multiple times. But after this, when you seem to have a good picture, a good analysis with your team, then you start thinking about, okay, how do we actually crystallize this analysis, and how do we formulate the findings in a way that it will help the creative task at hand, and it will be a story that the people that we're trying to get the thoughts through will actually remember it. So be analytical, but be analytical in a way that prepares you for the creativity.